Mike. Real quick, finishing up last week, you know, we had talked about what it takes to motivate your team, you know, to play. And last week we had to kind of push them a little bit, which was expected. You know, but we, as the week went on, we got better and better at what we were trying to do, and got to the game and was able to overcome 5 minutes of poor football from us offensively, defensively, and special teams wise to get it together and play 3 quarters and 10 minutes of good football and get a lot of people in that deserve to get in the game. So got that game over with Sunday, and then moved on to UConn, which you know, had a good day on Sunday as far as introducing the opponent. Studied them all day yesterday and got some good game plans in, and we're excited about starting Big East ball, which is you know, season number 2. You know, first season's over, which is non-conference. Now it's all about Big East football, and a good UConn team comes in here. And you know, without having to use a whole bunch of motivational tactics this week, our guys realized that you know, the game last year against UConn didn't end up the way that they wanted it to. I spent about 2 hours Sunday watching that game, getting a good feel for how that thing went last year, and UConn won the game. It was a tight game. Turnovers were the difference, but they got a whole bunch of people coming back, you know, that were in that game, and it was able to go to a BCS game. So our guys wanted that to happen to them last year, and it didn't. So I think that's going to provide a little motivation for us to get a good week of work. Take some questions.
What's UConn do well?
Physical. They're big. You know, they got a lot of, you know, their defensive front is big. They try to outnumber you. They try to suffocate you. They're physical. You know, they're good against the run. 1, because they're physical and they're strong, and 2, because they try to outnumber you. You know, offensively, you know, same thing. They're going to run a whole bunch of power offense. You know, they got a good O-line. They have. They're going to play fullbacks and tight ends, and they're going to try to pound you. You know, so it's much like what LSU's you know, scheme and way of football was. You know, so it's going to mean that we're going to have to do a good job of you know, of being physical. You know, and playing with a bunch of effort.
Western Michigan threw for a lot of yards against them. What did you see out of that? Anything that correlates with what you do that you could take from it?
Well, they just, you know, which, and again, UConn may change what their scheme is defensively. They may change, you know, what their plan is against us. I mean, nobody ever knows. But, you know, basically what they try to do is outnumber you in the box, make it hard to run the ball, you know, which means you gotta throw the ball. And Western Michigan is pretty good at throwing the ball. And I think they had 300-yard receivers against them, which means they had some guys make some plays, you know. And UConn, they had, I mean, they got their whole secondary back. You know, they were without one of their corners, which maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't. We just need to be able to prepare to put ourselves in position to make plays, and then we got to have receivers make plays, which Western Michigan had guys make plays in tight space that were covered. You know, so I give them credit. You know, you look at what UConn, you know, and you take the record out of it. You know, UConn lost. They've lost to 3 pretty good opponents. I mean, Vandy's, I think, 3-1. Iowa State's 3-1, and Western Michigan's 3-1. And they were that close to winning all 3 of those games, you know, so they could very easily be 5-0.
What have you seen out of Johnny McEntee? It seems like he's really come on over the last couple of weeks. Have you been able to watch all their games so far and seen his progression? Yeah,
which, you know, that's part of just an inexperienced guy, you know, being able to get the snaps, much like we've talked in here about various positions as far as, you know, guys that are inexperienced, they get out there and they play, you know, 9 times out of 10, those guys tend to get better, you know. So, you know, it's a new system for him, which probably held him back just a little bit, you know. But the fact that he's getting to be able to play a lot of football and is probably one reason he's shown improvement.
With Garrison's performance on Saturday, does that change how you game plan for UConn, or is it all about the opponent you play?
Yeah, it doesn't change how we game plan, because every game we've went into, you know, we've went in with running plays that we felt were going to work. You know, the best way to attack how they line up and what they like to do is by running these select plays. And so we went into the same game doing the same thing. And it's like I said since the day I got here, if we do it and it looks like crap, we'll probably won't do it as much, But if we hand the ball off and we're fitting it up right, and he's hitting the hole and making people miss, and he's probably going to carry it 32 times.
I think everybody has said that he's the best of the receiving backs. In a way, is it good for him to be maybe out front right now, because you don't have to, if you want to play fast, for example, you have to sub because he can catch it, he can run it. Is it linear in that regard?
I think he probably is a little bit better, but when Bowie was in there, we didn't take him out to throw him a screen or call a pass play or any of that. Same thing with Bernard. All three of those guys are capable of running routes and catching screens and making things happen. So the first part of your question I agree with. The second part, I don't think we need to worry about that too much.
You haven't gotten off the real fast starts, including the last game. It was the 5 minutes of Bedwell. Is there a reason for that, and are you attacking that in any way?
We're talking about it, which we talked about it against Maryland, and we started really fast, which that was 3 games ago. You can't start any faster than we did against Maryland. That was a noon game, so we'll probably take the same approach that we did, heading into the Maryland game, and hopefully we'll have the same results.
Is that the result of anything? Is it, when you don't get off good? I mean, is it anything to put your finger on?
Yeah, I just talk about it. I mean, we can't get them up at 8 and feed them and have practice and meetings and then practice at noon. I mean that we can't do that because of school. So I just talk about it and get them to focus on it and try to get them to buy into it.
What did you see out of your linebackers last week with the changes, with Rigg out and Snow in and Najee moving over?
Yeah, played well. I mean, Najee's a guy that, obviously if we could clone 3 of them, we'd like him at each of the 3 linebacker spots. He's a good player. He's a team leader. He's smart. He understands what Jeff's wanting him to do defensively, and is physical and makes a bunch of plays. I mean, he's one of the leading tacklers every single time that we line up. So, regardless of where he plays, it's going to be productive, and we were happy with how Snow got in there with limited experience. We were happy with how he got in there and played.
Are you guys anticipating making any changes, or do you think you're going to roll with those guys again this week?
It depends how today and tomorrow and Thursday go. Have you ever heard that before?
Once or twice. How about UConn's defensive line? They're getting a lot of sacks. They're getting a lot of pressure. I mean, do you guys really focus on that? And what have you been telling your offensive line to prepare for?
They're all back from last year. They're a big physical bunch that have played a lot of football and play hard. Schematically, they do things to try to create problems to get guys free, and they do a good job of it. They're getting 8 negative plays a game, and I think 3 sacks a game or something like that. So, it'll be another challenge for our offensive line. It'll be another challenge for Gino and the coaches to come up schematically with things that put ourselves in proper situations. I mean, if they're trying to suffocate you on the line of scrimmage, then you don't need to be stubborn and do things that allow them to be successful like that. So we'll have to figure out what their plan is and attack it to the best way that we know how to. But it will be a challenge of them to identify things, because they junk up everything in the front and all that stuff, much like our defense does. So it'll be a challenge to identify what they're in, target it, and finish the blocks.
Dan, how far back do you go film-wise? At this point in the year, does this season give you enough? Or, you go back to Syracuse when Pasqualoni was there, NFL stuff. How far back do you look?
We'd probably have enough. You're looking at 5 games, which was quite a bit. We got some opponents that did some things that we can look at and be okay with it. You tend not to go back a couple years. We did go back last year to Maryland, which is where their defense coordinator was last year. Look at a few things, double check some things. It's harder to go back to the NFL stuff because there's a lot more dynamics to it as far as who's actually helping make the decisions, to call things and all that stuff. So 5 games is plenty, but we can go back to the previous year if the defense coordinator was truly in charge of, or offensive coordinator was truly in charge of what they were doing.
I think you mentioned yesterday that your offensive line has been really coachable, which is part of why there's been some improvement there. Can you elaborate on that a little bit in terms of like what this particular group, brings to the table for you guys, like at practice when they're, learning?
I think it means a lot to most of them. Can't say it means a lot to all of them, but you look at a guy like Tyler Rader, who, was a walk-on here, West Virginia kid, means probably as much to him as anybody that is around, and that's why we made him a captain last week, and, Barclay probably was, in my opinion, the player of the week last week, just being as solid as you can possibly be, graded out the highest. He had my vote for player of the week because without a guy like him up front doing specific things, Dustin wouldn't have got free. Joey Madsen continues to be consistent, get us targeted, get us headed in the right direction. And Edgar's he's been a pleasant surprise, and continues to work hard every week. Coach Bedenbaugh does a great job with those guys, which is maybe a shock to y'all because you don't know him, but I've been with him and around him for a long time and understand what kind of a coach he is and how much it means to him and how he gets those guys to respond.
I think Spain had some chances last week guard and he alternated the other two at right one. See anything that's encouraging?
The encouraging stuff is that he's massive and fairly athletic and, when he wants to can get things done, but that's not always the case. There's a level of consistency, that needs to exist for him to get any kind of praise out of me, which doesn't exist now, and it may take him some time to get there.
After the offensive week you guys had last week, what's your biggest concern heading in against UConn, and how do you keep the guys from getting complacent after kind of being able to do almost whatever they wanted to last week?
I'm not worried about the complacency things, the complacency angle to it. I mean, that's why we pay coaches and keep them motivated and all that, which, that's just our job, and we'll handle that. Our job is to be the same every week and continue to improve, which one thing we talked about last week, as far as what our job is after a, quote-unquote decent job offensively last week, our job was to improve, which I felt like we did. And we, for the, not talking about the first 5 minutes, but we played relatively consistent throughout the game. So continue just to try to improve is what our job is. The fact that UConn does a really good job of run defense, they're only giving up about 80 yards or whatever it is. Getting us one-dimensional is something that is always something that's on my mind.
In your home games, you've had 4 very different dates. Home opener Marshall, FCS, LSU at night, awful weather last week. What do you envision, how do you establish a consistency for what you envision and what you want to do going forward?
Well, last week was disappointing, to be honest with you, just from much like what we just talked about with our offense, our job's to be consistent every week, and try to make it as good as we possibly can every week. And it's our coaches and players' expectations to, do their very best every week, and whether it was, the first game of the year with the excitement or, and we didn't do the best of jobs against that second game, but we ended up playing okay in the second half. Last week was easy, and then 2 weeks ago was easy, and then you come into this week where you got all kinds of excuses not to play well, had to cancel the man trip. We had, bad weather. It was cold. It was wet. The environment was terrible. It was relatively early. Maybe you didn't respect your opponent. No matter what the excuses were, our players didn't buy into it, but obviously our fan base did. So, whatever our expectations are with our players as far as preparing every week and going to the game and playing their best, I highly encourage our students and our support to take the same approach. You only get 7 opportunities a week or 7 opportunities a year. What's so hard about it? Is it too cold? It wasn't too cold for our players. It wasn't too cold for our coaches or managers or trainers. They were out there. So why did we have 20,000 people less of this one than we did last week? And the funny part about it is we're all talking 2 weeks ago about how much difference the fans and the crowd's going to make to the LSU people. Well, LSU, played well in front of 62,000 of our people, and then turned around and went home and played a 1-4 Kentucky team at noon and had 95,000 people there. You want to talk about an elite program, that's one. I don't know about this place.
Fixes? Is it, I mean, you have to get out there and beat the drum a little louder, or is it just something
I don't
that
know.
if you're 10-1, for example, they just show up and maybe not when they're 1-1?
It's a good question. I'm new here. You guys aren't. I just see it. I just call it like I see it. I mean, you guys know me pretty well by now. I'm just gonna go ahead and say what I think. So, all I heard in the offseason, I did get out there and beat the drum down. I talked about how important it is to our athletic department and our players and our coaches to have support. And all I heard about was how big of how much this meant to everybody across the state of West Virginia. And this was the NFL team here in town, and we're going to be there to support you. Well, having 40,000 people at a game isn't doing that. And the only thing we can do about it is, and which is why I'm talking about it now, I mean, the only thing we can do about it is fix it, which we do our best every week to fix what the problems are offensively, defensively, and special teams wise. Well, what's everybody across the state of West Virginia, including the student body, doing to fix the fact that our players had to show up and play in front of 40,000 people? We have a conference game coming up this week. It's at noon. I can give you some excuses now. Playing a team that's 2-3, well, they should be 5-0. Playing at noon, well, who cares? Get up. Man trips at 9:45. Are we going to have a good crowd, or are we going to have nobody there? Is the weather going to be 85 and sunny, or is it going to be 25 and snowing? Really doesn't matter, because coaches and players and trainers and everybody else are going to be there. That's what our job is. So, what's the support people's job? All right. See you guys Saturday.